Well, my point is that you can defeat my argument very simple. You simply have to give one account of Mecca on a map or being mentioned anywhere before 600 AD. That's what you got to do. The earliest map we have of the Kaaba that has the earliest mention we have of the Kaaba is from 741 AD. Yeah. That's 100 years after Muhammad died. That's a good methodology.
Chris,
totally agree with that.
You're going and forget. Pardon the pun. You're going off Ptolemy's work as gospel. They did not traverse the Mediterranean, the Middle East, the subcontinent, and the Far East in terms of China. Okay. Ibn Battuta did.
Yeah.
Marco Polo did.
Yeah, but
Ptolemy did not.
Even if we ignore 1,000 years ago or whatever and look right up to the time of Muhammad, because according to your narrations, there would have been pagans who would have been encircling the Kaaba at the time, yeah? But we have no evidence of that.
You can find records of that in China. Not even NASA saying that we've seen cracks in the moon that are consistent with the moon.
No, that's a lie. Either you're lying or you're not telling the truth.
I'm looking into it right now.
NASA has been asked about this and they said there is no evidence the moon was once split in half and then rejoined. When Muhammad had relations with Aisha when she was 9, you said that was untrue. But Jesus, he never had relations with anyone. He was sexually pure. He didn't commit sex with other women. Is that better then?
هي مش لازم تكون انك انت صح ولا غلط انه مثلا هي يعني مسألة عادية يعني كل واحد يسوي.
You're saying that marriage and sex doesn't always have to be like mandatory, like it's just like everyone else.
يعني هي مش مسألة نقدر نخلي واحد فيه يكون أحسن ولا أسوأ. يقول لي عمل.
Like we can't just say that because Muhammad has sex or anything, he's better than Isa.
يقول له مثلا هنا في الكنيسة واحد ما يتزوج. بابا الكنيسة ما يتزوج بس ممكن يتحرش بحد. مش معناته إنه سيء أما يقول.
Like what is it called? Like the higher person in churches.
What's that, sorry? Second.
What are they called? People in churches, like the
priest. Yeah, we're priests. Yeah.
He never married, but maybe he make it sex with someone.
Right.
We can't say he.
Okay,
it's wrong.
Okay, so we know from our scriptures the earliest accounts of Jesus' life that he didn't have sexual relations with anyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
مش إنه ما تزوج يعني هو أحسن.
And just because he didn't get married doesn't mean that he's better.
Okay, sure. So we actually think that Jesus is sinless. We believe that Jesus is morally perfect. That he never did anything knowingly wrong in his life. So when you contrast that with what Islam teaches, Islam also has Jesus in a high position. It says that Jesus is the one who defended Mary from the cradle. He is the one that committed no sin. He is the Messiah. But it seems to me that if we accept that Muhammad did things wrong, for example, Muhammad had people stoned and he stoned people. There are hadith where it says, and Sahih hadith, where Muhammad is recorded as stoning a Jewish person. And I can show you the verses of Muhammad doing certain things that I think you'll probably agree with me aren't great. They aren't good to do today. But when you look at Jesus didn't do any of that.
يقول أنت يعني تتقبل أن محمد سوى كل شيء بس يعني عندهم أن عيسى ما سوى ولا غلطة يعني حتى في البايبل عندهم أبدا ما سوى ولا غلطة يعني هو
يقول أنا ما درست حياة جيسوس سوى غلط ولا ما سوى غلط بس أكيد أنه إذا حتى تتبع حياته أكبر غلطة عنده أنه ما دون كلامه اليوم والناس كثير بعدين دون كلامه ما نعرف نشوف بالضبط شو سوى.
He didn't study Jesus' life.
Okay, sure.
But Jesus didn't write down everything he did, so no one actually really.
After a long time, the people write about him. He great, he perfect, but not like Muhammad. Muhammad, they write about him.
Did they change? Wait, Muhammad wrote everything down.
Yeah,
Not him, like some people wrote
Some
things
people
about him.
hadith write about his history, his
Yeah.
life, okay. But Jesus, after maybe 200 years, 300 years, the people start to care, to write about him,
Okay.
try to say he is perfect.
Sure. So do you know when the hadith? Do you know when that started? When people started to write down the hadith, the Sahih hadith.
Hadith when he lived and when he died.
So the earliest you have, it would be for the hadith anyway, is Sahih al-Bukhari, and Sahih al-Bukhari I think was around 830. So that's 200 years after the Prophet died.
Okay, but he
Right.
he write about the people who's write hadith from direct for him.
Right. So
Like people
if we,
around him.
sure, he has the isnad, he has the train of narration. But the issue is that again, this comes 200 years later. So although there's a science that Muslims like to think is good, the isnad is good science, no scholar takes the isnad as a historical account. There are no scholars who look at what the isnad says about Jesus and then therefore reads into that what Jesus would have said. They go to the earliest sources, and the earliest sources we have about Jesus are in the same century as Jesus, and that would be the gospel accounts. It'd be Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So when we want to know what Jesus said and what he taught, we look at the earliest documents.
يؤمن بأشياء مشتركة بين جيسوس وبين الإسلام ولا لا؟
Do you believe the connections between Jesus and Islam?
No. So we're warned about people through our scriptures who would come after Jesus and would claim to speak in his name and would claim to put words into his mouth. And for us, we think Muhammad is one of those because Muhammad said things that Jesus himself never did, right? So first of all, the stories in the Quran of Jesus making clay birds and breathing life into them, we don't believe he did that. And the reason why is because we know where that came from. It came from what we call a Gnostic gospel. A Gnostic gospel is from the 2nd century onwards. That's 100 years after Jesus. People who never knew Jesus started to write things about Jesus and to say that Jesus said these things. And because we know they never came from Jesus, we know he never said them. But the problem is that we find it in the Quran. So in the Quran we have these stories and we know where they came from originally. So the Quran isn't an original Musaf, it is an original book. Parts of it come from earlier. And we know where those came from.
ترجم لا ما أعرف
يقول انه يعني يقول ان يعني هو ما يصدق ان الكلام اللي مكتوب في القران يعني صدق. يعني يعرف ان الكلام يعني عبد.
ترجم
يقول انه مش صدق يعني الكلام المكتوب.
يقول له انت يعني مهتم بالاديان وايد يعني انت دارس الاديان
مش في الموضوع.
اسال عادي هو يبي يتكلم.
Okay, this is out of context, but
Sure.
Do you study religion?
I don't, not academically. I study them passionately in my own time. So I do my own religion through Bible study, and I also do Islam. I also do Jehovah's Witnesses and things like that. But yeah.
يقول له هو من وين؟
Where are you from?
Where am I from? Up north.
London, right?
No. You know, not London, not south of England.
مانشستر لايك ذيس.
Yeah, around there. Let's say that.
ليش جيسوس طلع جيسوس وين طلع عندنا في المطلع ليش ما طلع عندهم؟
Why did Jesus come from the Middle East and not from
North.
England?
Well, is it not enough where I'm from, like north of England? No. Right, well, we agree on one thing, that God is the one who determines all things, yeah? So if he wishes to send his prophets in the Middle East, if he wishes to send his prophets from Jerusalem, Damascus, wherever, then that is his will and his prerogative, right? But it's important to know that Muhammad himself, we have no evidence of him existing as a person. We find that there are accounts of him that talk about him living after he supposedly died. So we know the traditional Islamic narrative is wrong. So for example, you know Mecca, the place of where Muhammad is supposed to be from. There is no accounts of Mecca existing as a geographical place.
يقول أنا ما في دليل ان محمد هو كان موجود في الدنيا. يعني الناس دونوه عقب ما مات.
يعني هو ما يعتقد انه في شخصيه اسمها محمد.
So you don't believe that there has been a character named Muhammad?
So myself, I don't know. I don't know because there are accounts of him, but they say that he was still alive after 632, which is when the Islamic sources say he should have died. So that to me says, well, maybe there was a Muhammad, but he's not that Muhammad that's recorded in the hadith.
ما يعرف بس يقول انا عقب ما مات الناس دونوه عنه.
But let's
من سوى الاختراع هذا الاسلام كله. يقول هناك اخترع يعني طلعت الامه هاي كلها مسلمه وانتشر وقاعد يزيد.
So how do you believe that Islam started and just went around with people?
A lot of it we don't know. We're trying to find out because we're looking into things like coins that were printed along that time, because the coins would have had your religion on them. But we know that Islam seems to have started later than the time of Muhammad, because we only start seeing coins that say Muhammad, blessed be, the Shahada, and actually having the word Muhammad on the coins. We only see that later on, nearer the next century. So not the 7th century where Muhammad was, but more like the 8th century.
Because before very little people believed that Islam was a religion. So it only started transcending between people later on.
Yeah,
Not when he
I do think that the Islam eventually came to be, but I don't think it came to be in the time of Muhammad, because there's no.
Because very little amount of people believe that he.
Well, there's also okay. So in the traditions, there's Caliph Uthman, who he collected the Quran and he put it into one standardized copy, and he distributed that copy to Mecca, Medina, Kufa, and Basra, and that's in modern day Iraq and Damascus. The problem is that we don't have that copy, so it's hard to know at what point Islam came into being, because all of the stories about what happened at the time, where Muhammad was, what he did, we don't have evidence for it. We don't have evidence for Mecca, for example. We don't.
But it does exist. It is a place.
Oh yeah, it is now, absolutely. I think that Mecca came much later. Yeah. So you look at the Dome of the Rock, yeah, the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So you look at the oldest inscriptions on the Dome of the Rock, they don't mention Muhammad. The new inscriptions mention Muhammad, because the Dome of the Rock had been destroyed many times and it had been rebuilt. So in the areas that are rebuilt, it says Muhammad. But in the original inscriptions, the oldest, it never mentions Muhammad. So a lot of people think that the original inscription is actually about Jesus and not Muhammad.
روح المدينه بتشوف الكاميرا موجوده. اذا ما في محمد.
He says go to his grave and you'll find his grave in Medina.
Say again?
Go to his grave and you'll see that he actually existed.
Well, again, is that something that was always there, or did that come later? So think of this. In Mecca, they build large buildings in Mecca, yeah? And to build large buildings, you have to dig deep into the ground. And when you dig into the ground, you discover artifacts. So if Mecca was a very ancient city that many people across the world used to come to for pilgrimage to the Hajj, yeah? They would have seen evidence of this happening. But when they don't find anything. They don't find any.
Either way, because they haven't done it.
They're building buildings in Mecca, you know that?
Yeah, but they haven't excavated.
You know, in order to excavate, you have to build under the ground, right?
How far do you have to build on?
A lot, from massive towers, yeah.
Just from one part there, you think that just because they haven't found one part where there's
They're building large structures all over Mecca, you're aware of that?
extrapolated to the whole of the city.
What I'm saying is that if there was a big city, they would have found lots of archaeological evidence, but we have found none.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it wasn't a big city, it was a caravan city.
No, it was the center of pilgrimage, right? So there should have been lots of activity there, right?
But you're saying
Yeah.
because they built towers
Yeah.
in certain parts of the city,
Where you have to
and they
dig
haven't found
underground.
anything underneath,
Yeah. You know that like
extrapolate
okay,
and say there's nothing underneath the whole city.
right, which is a
Despite the
logical
fact-
inference.
But despite the fact that they've got a policy against they don't do archaeology in Mecca.
Well,
All
yeah,
the-
and I think the reason they don't do archaeology is because there's nothing there.
Come on.
There's nothing
Yeah,
there.
cool.
That's
Even if
no,
they did find
okay.
something, they wouldn't tell you
let's compare it. Let's compare it.
How did you lot
Wait,
find
wait.
out about Mount Sinai, whatever it is?
Wait. In Jerusalem,
How do you find out about it? They got chased out with guns when they tried to go there
In
by the
Jerusalem,
Saudis.
it's actually
They don't know what's
illegal.
going on.
Listen. In Jerusalem, it's actually illegal to excavate certain areas here because we know what's there. We know it's a holy site. So it's incredibly careful for
Then
people
why
to
doesn't
stop
that apply
digging.
to Mecca?
Because you have dug and you've built many large buildings, and
They're not
underground there's
built-
nothing
yeah, but they're
there.
not built buildings in Jerusalem.
But yes, they do. It has to
Then
be
what's the
incredibly
difference?
careful about it.
Yeah, but how do you know?
Okay,
that they're doing that in
wait.
Mecca?
We have
That's what I'm
found
saying. You're saying
Solomon's temple.
Yeah.
We have found all sorts of
but
archaeological artifacts.
you're allowed the difference between
Yeah, but you have to be very careful because
but
we
the
know
difference
there's
between Jerusalem
valuable
and Mecca
things
is that
there.
You're allowed to excavate. They
Right.
got they
But
actively
in
push
Mecca,
it.
when
In
you
Mecca,
build
they
these
don't.
buildings, you don't
And you're
find
trying-
anything.
Okay.
But remember, Mecca is meant to be the first city, yeah? The city of Adam and Eve, yeah?
Yeah.
So it should be a massively, rich archaeological evidence
How long
everywhere.
was Adam and Eve then?
Thousands of years, yeah? We'll say thousands of years. We can say however long.
Hundreds
But
of years,
remember, sure, I don't mind, yeah? What I'm saying though is that there should be a rich archaeological evidence, but there isn't any. And the reason there isn't any, I think, is because
So is there
Mecca
no
wasn't an
Is there no
city.
rich archaeological evidence in Saudi Arabia?
I'm just talking about Mecca as specifically. Yeah, Mecca.
Despite the fact they got a policy to not excavate or push archaeology in Mecca, but there's
Right.
a rich
there's
archaeological
nothing
history
there.
outside of Mecca, and then you're saying that there's nothing in Mecca.
What I'm
You haven't
saying
found
is
anything
that
in from
Mecca,
buildings.
no,
Despite the fact that they're
Mecca,
against excavating,
wait,
it doesn't make sense what you're saying.
Mecca is a place which is meant to be the very origin of humanity from Adam and Eve's
I
time, yeah?
understand that, I
Right.
understand that.
So you would have expected then, if people around the world came to this place to see the Kaaba, there would have been archaeological
Do you
evidence.
understand?
You're saying that there was
do you-
never
do you-
people
do
from
you
world were
reckon-
going
Do you
to
realise
it.
that the mosque in Mecca?
Hmm.
Do you realise that's
Been rebuilt.
the whole size? Do you realise that the size of it now is the size of Mecca back before? Underneath the mosque is how Mecca was before.
Right, it's gone through lots of
understand
changes, yeah, totally.
Do you understand
yeah.
what I'm trying to say? So
Yeah.
you're asking about everything that you would want to find would be under that mosque because it's grown so much to the point where it's
No.
encompassed the old Mecca.
Remember
You know
what I'm
trying to say?
saying?
So what you're
No.
looking for, what you're looking at, are areas that would have been outside of Mecca.
Right.
It's considered
That's
to be
fine.
Mecca
That's
right now.
fine.
No,
That's
it's
fine.
not.
No,
Because you're
listen.
saying that you should be finding archaeological
Yeah,
evidence.
anywhere near Mecca. There
Yeah, but
isn't
the point
any.
I'm making is,
Do you know-
that it's now
yeah.
the whole thing is a mosque.
No, I'm saying even if you go out
So
of that.
you're saying we should
yeah.
be digging underneath the mosque.
No, what I'm saying is even if you go out of that, you should find archaeological
Yeah, but when
evidence
you
of
do go
people
out of that, you
travelling
do.
to it. No, you don't. You don't find
Of course you
anything.
do.
It's
course
a
you do.
desert. It's literally a desert.
Have you they find
You know-
structures, 9,000-year-old structures, they find 12,000-year-old structures of
No, they
camels.
don't.
Of course they've got a place called
Structures of
Medina
camels.
Saleh. Have you not seen the Nabatean? You clearly don't know what you're talking about.
Nabateans were north.
Have you not seen so you think the Nabateans were just in the north?
No,
You
what I'm
clearly
saying
have
to you
no-
is
you have- you
no
have
one
no
was
clue about
no
Arab
one was
history when you come
travelling.
and start talking about
No
it.
one was travelling
What books-
en
can I ask
masse
you
to
something?
Mecca.
What books have you read about
No,
Arab
wait.
history?
No
Can
one.
I ask you something? What books have you read about Arab
Let me
history?
speak.
Huh?
Jeez. Let me speak.
I
I know,
He's
it's just
trying to tell me. He's saying to me that. He's saying to
let
me.
me speak.
Yeah, go on, then respond.
What I'm saying to you is, given the accusation that there should have been lots of people from all over the world traveling to a place called Mecca, which is a desert that doesn't have its own aqueducts, doesn't have rivers, so it can't sustain large amounts of people anyway, you're telling me that the reason why there's no archaeological evidence around at all is what exactly?
Do you want me to explain to
Yeah,
you?
go on.
Okay, cool. The reason why you can't find archaeological evidence of historical Mecca is
Yeah.
because now all of that is underneath a mosque that they don't excavate.
So they
Do
never
you
went
understand
anywhere.
the point I'm
They
making to you?
teleported to Mecca.
Do you understand the point I'm making to you? He's asking for evidence. Yeah. So the mosque that now is basically the whole of Mecca from it's Mecca, bigger from the Mecca that he's looking for. Because he's talking about something. Because it's a mosque now. Yeah, because they're not going to dig under a mosque. They don't dig on the mosque. Okay. You understand the point I'm trying to make? He's trying to say
How would
because
you find the proof though if it's there? If you
but
can't
he's trying to. In Mecca, there's an active. They got an act. They don't push archaeology at all. But he's saying because
you're not even allowed to fly airplanes
Yeah.
over
So, but
Mecca,
he's trying to
I
say.
know
He's trying to say because of that, there's nothing there. That's the inference.
No,
he's
there
taking.
there
That's
is
the
nothing
inference
there.
he's
We
making.
have no archaeology.
No, it's not.
Serious
That's
point,
okay,
though.
cool.
Go on. I just
You
because
was here
I'm
from the
curious.
beginning
I'm
because I
curious.
butted in. This wasn't my conversation. I butted in.
Right.
And now you're trying to
There's-
backtrack what you're saying.
I'm not trying to backtrack you. I'm just trying to address what you're saying.
Okay, go on.
What I'm saying is, given the claims, right, because they're not just saying it was a popular city, which is in itself is hard to accept, but they're saying it was the greatest city from the time of Adam and Eve. So you would expect naturally, because supposedly many people, it doesn't say how many, but many people came from all over the world to visit the Kaaba. So you would expect to find some evidence of travellers who would have had camels or whatever and trade caravans going into Mecca, but you don't find
On the
any.
journey to
on the
Mecca.
journey,
but
anywhere
you
near
don't.
it, yeah.
But
So
you-
not
So essentially
yeah.
saying that
He's
Mecca
conflating
wasn't
2
there.
points.
So what I'm saying is we have no archaeological evidence that Mecca was a place. That's what I'm saying.
I've read the same.
Yeah.
But you're complaining.
Wait, okay. So let's
there
look at
is a lot of
okay.
evidence that
Okay.
people were
So
heading towards
why
Mecca
does Ptolemy?
outside of Mecca.
Wait. Why does Ptolemy?
Have you ever heard of a desert kite? Have you not seen how much desert kites they found from 8,000 years ago, 7,000 years
Desert
ago,
what?
6,000 years
Sorry?
ago? Desert kites.
What, mate, think about it
you know what
reasonably.
desert kite is?
Think about it reasonably. How can a desert with no way of providing sustenance to people there have thousands of people there?
Do you think it was always a desert?
You need water.
Yeah, but do you think that was always a desert?
Yeah, well,
Do you
Mecca
think, do you think there was always a desert?
was.
Of course, just 5,000 years ago it was in a desert. You could look into it. You can look into it.
Okay,
Science
all right,
will tell you that
sure.
5,000 years ago it was in a
Okay,
desert.
so
But
that's
what I'm trying to say.
everything from before 5,000.
No, but the point is, I know what he's trying to do. He's not genuine at all.
What do you mean I'm not genuine? I'm generally convinced that there is no
You've
archaeological.
moved the goalpost 3 times in this one conversation.
What?
Since he's
We're still talking about the same thing, aren't we?
Yeah, but you've changed what you're saying 3 times.
Why? What was I
First
saying
you were
originally?
saying that there's
No
nothing
archaeological
underneath
evidence.
Mecca, there's
No,
none.
I never.
Yes, you
I
did.
said.
That's what you said.
I said
How
there's
would you
no
know that?
archaeological
They've
evidence
dug
for
underneath
Mecca.
He was like, yeah, they have. And I was like, okay, cool.
Oh, okay.
But the whole of Mecca is underneath the mosque right now. So how have they dug underneath the mosque?
Okay,
And
why
then
does
you backtracked and said,
Ptolemy-
no, I'm saying just outside that.
Why
And
does-
I told you that if you go in towards Mecca, you'd find that loads of it. And then I told you about Medina Saleh. I told you about all the archaeological sites. From
Wait, you know Mecca
even
now
from
they have.
Neolithic times.
Wait.
They got archaeological sites from,
No.
from there.
In Mecca now, the only way they sustain the 2 to 3 million Muslims who go there for
It
Hajj every
grows,
year.
it grows
Yeah.
exponentially.
They have
Crazy.
aqueducts that they've built to supply it with water. You're aware of that? Because there's no way on earth that area can supply itself.
What do you mean by aqueducts? So they got piping. They didn't need to.
Yeah,
aqueducts.
they've literally built in modern day. They've had to build massive aqueducts to support it.
What do you mean by aqueducts? They got piping. underwater
Yes, yeah,
piping.
they're literally to supply Mecca with water.
In one day.
No, I'm saying in modern times, yeah, they've built aqueducts to supply Mecca with water.
But they haven't built aqueducts. They got underwater piping.
It comes from an aqueduct, right? So, and that's how you get fresh water. Aqueducts turn the salt water into fresh water.
Aqueducts?
No.
It's not. I don't think you know what we're talking about. Aqueducts is an older version of piping. How people
Yeah.
used to get water to people.
Yeah, yeah.
You get your
Before we had
terminology.
piping. So I think
Okay,
you
all right,
really
fair
don't know
enough.
what you're talking about.
What?
I'm sorry
No,
to,
okay,
I don't
all right.
mean to
Let's
be
talk
rude,
about
but
Ptolemy.
you
Yeah.
know what you're talking
If you look at ancient map,
The water in Mecca
it's cartographers.
comes from Zemzem.
about. Yeah, he knows.
Yeah,
that
the
there's natural
Zamzam
wells
well
there
can
as
have like, was it 19 square meter, 19 liters per second of water the Zamzam well can provide. That's
He's
nowhere
been waiting
near
to drop
enough.
that. He's been waiting to drop that.
There's nowhere near enough water.
All of the
But you're
wa-
saying that.
all of the water in Mecca comes from Zemzem.
I wouldn't say.
They
Well,
don't, they
where
don't
does
bust
cook-
in any water.
Well, they must do.
The closest mountainous
I'm
region.
I'm not too sure. About
I'm telling you, the closest mountain,
How old is Mecca?
the closest.
We don't know, to be honest, man.
The
We
closest-
believe Mecca. We believe the actual the place of worship was built by Abraham. But we
We
believe
had that
Adam was the
talk
one.
earlier.
Sorry, brother.
No, but I'm just asking roughly how old do you think Mecca is? What's a rough estimate?
We don't have a
on the
date.
age?
We don't have a date to Abraham.
So you can't date it to Abraham's time.
We don't. No, I can't tell you like 4,000 years. We don't have a date.
Well, yeah, you would have to say that it would also be Adam and Eve, though,
the
right?
Muslims don't believe the
But if
world.
it's Adam and Eve, that predates.
Predates Abraham.
The
yeah.
first humans.
Abraham.
So the first, so however old all of creation and humanity is,
That's all
it's
Mecca.
yeah, I guess. Is
We
that
don't.
right?
We don't believe like. I think it's in the Old Testament. We don't believe humanity is like the world is 6,000 years old. We don't.
No,
We don't have anything to say the world is 6,000 years.
We believe that.
So if we find, I think it's in the Old Testament. Yeah?
It's
If you put the genealogies together, it works out to like 12,000 to 15,000.
yeah, it's
More than
young Earth creationists,
more
mostly
than
an American
Yeah.
movement.
We
Yeah.
don't. So
I don't
if
believe
we
that.
find human skeletons, humans like 2,000 years, 200,000 years, we don't have a problem believing that. Okay. In relation to, I keep hearing Adam and Eve.
Yeah, just as a date of reference.
Yeah.
But I mean, thousands of years. I'm happy to say thousands of years. In all
It's
honesty.
the birthplace of
So
mankind.
Quran and the Bible, as hard as it is for us, and move that aside, and someone's to come to me, to you, and to you, and to you, and say, prove to me, without biblical Quranic scripture,
Yeah.
prove to me Abraham existed, would you be able to prove it? Would we be able to prove it?
Personally, I ain't looked into it, so I'm gonna probably say from my perspective right now, no. I personally couldn't.
I agree with
I
you.
personally don't know enough to
I
say
agree
I
with you.
could.
From what I've researched, there is nothing outside of scripture talking about this man Abraham.
I think the same.
So when you say, is there anything from the historical record, bar
Predate,
scripture,
yeah.
to talk about Mecca,
Yeah.
or to talk even about Moses, or even Noah, we don't have anything.
So what I would say
don't have
here,
it.
just to
The
qualify
closest
that,
we
because-
have just to land very quickly, Chris, the closest we have is the flood narrative. They found tablets of the Sumerians, Gilgamesh, talking about a flood in supposedly that region, Iraq. So that we can claim, that's something outside of scripture, but then they say, but you've copied it from these pagans.
It's a play
So
on.
they're trying to hit that back to us. You understand? So but that's my point. If we can pose that question to a lot of our religion, that we can't prove from the historical record outside of scripture.
Right. Okay. So just to clarify with that, though, I agree with large amounts of that. But I do want to say that in terms of the existence of Mecca, remember that I'm saying that there wasn't any even up until the time of Muhammad. So I'm not talking about thousands of years, although there should have been an accumulation of evidence of coming from those thousands of years. But even just say 400 AD, there's no evidence of Mecca there. We have Ptolemy. So Ptolemy was a cartographist who actually went into Arabia and noted down where all the major cities and towns were. He never mentioned Mecca.
Alexander the Great was it Alexander the Great who sent people to Arabia to have a look around Arabia and they come across nothing?
Yeah, so
Mecca?
Well, there was Ptolemy who would have been more Roman than Greek, but here's a point to mention. According to these cartographists, Arabia was divided in the Roman idea for three parts. Arabia, I forgot its name, Felix, which was Yemen, and Omar, which is south. And then you had Arabia Deserta, which was the bit in the middle, where the Hijaz is, so where Mecca and Medina would have been. And then you have the north. I can't remember what the north is called. But as far as they were concerned, the north had value. Yemen and Omar in that area had value. But the bit in the middle, they didn't seem particularly... Yeah, there's actually an account of the Romans going to try and invade Yemen. And they went through Arabia Deserta, so they went near-ish Medina and Mecca. There's no accounts of it. So. That to me, I think is good reason to doubt the existence of Mecca as a place and to call into question the standard Islamic narrative.
So in the Bible, when it refers to the valley of Mecca, what do you say that?
Where you talking about Isaiah 42?
Yeah.
Well, wherever it was a place where they were going to, as where God was, so God's temple. So unless you think God's temple was...
You know in the Quran it's also referred to as Mecca as well, yeah?
What do you mean?
Mecca is also referred to as Mecca in the Quran as well.
Well, okay, but I haven't looked. I will agree with what my friend here said. I haven't looked into that enough to know to talk about it.
If you haven't looked into it, then you can't make claims. This is the issue.
Well,
I'm pretty. Claims.
Well, I've just clarified. I said if we talk about that, I'm not going to be.
Claim that Mecca was built by Abraham is also
the
just
the point I just made was that in the
Bro,
Bible.
it's leaking.
In the Bible.
Is it finished?
Yeah, I owe you a pound anyway. You found
No, that's yours, my friend.
Sure.
Yeah.
Split it.
In the Bible, it refers to Abraham, and these are going to a place called a Valley of Mecca. And I'm saying in the Quran, Mecca is also referred to as Mecca as well.
And geographically.
So what I'm trying to ask you from the biblical perspective, where is this Mecca? And he said to me, I don't know. So I'm saying.
Well, no,
so
we have an
idea.
idea. We have an idea that it's
in the desert, but where's the desert?
No, well, around the region of Jerusalem, somewhere nearby. The issue is that if you were to accept the idea that this is actually a reference to Mecca, you would have to accept that Abraham decided to make a massive journey for about 1,200 kilometers south, which is difficult to understand why he would do that.
Can I just understand your argument? So your argument is that Mecca didn't exist before the Prophet. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it didn't exist at the time of the Prophet as well.
At the time of the Prophet as well?
Because there's no evidence of it.
Have you ever heard of Negashi? Ethiopian emperor called Negashi?
Nope.
He's someone who come and invaded Arabia, pre-Islamic times.
Pre-Islamic times, right. Did he find Mecca and Medina?
Yeah, he took elephants to Mecca from across the Red Sea.
He took elephants into a desert?
From across the Red Sea.
But did he
do you know how that
city called Mecca?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it was called Mecca.
You do know? Wait. You do know that elephants need water, yeah?
Names of cities change. Do you get it? So
Well,
it's
not
like
re-
if
it's Mecca or Medina, I wouldn't expect they change too much over
of course it is.
time.
Medina was called Yathrib before.
Okay.
Also,
Mecca was called Mecca before. Yeah, I've just said this several times. Like, he's got an agenda where he's trying to prove me wrong, even despite the fact that he's never actually looked into it.
No, I'm talking about. I'm talking about.
Towards him. So, and I apologise if I'm coming across as a bit. But this is what
Sorry,
I'm.
I'm just listening.
And I've listened to this guy. Changed his goalposts, changed his point 4 times since I've been there.
Well, I'm trying to catch up with you because you're going all over.
Chase.
What I don't know about what I haven't. Sorry, what?
Elephants would need water, right?
Yes, which is why no scholar would believe that elephants went across
Okay, so then
the
how
desert.
did Hannibal take elephants through Spain? Have you?
Spain
have
is
you
in a desert. Like
yes, the middle of
Spain.
Spain is a desert. Have you never been to Spain?
I've been to Spain, mate. I
Yeah,
wasn't
now
in
you
a
have, but
desert.
if you used to go there, of course, it's a desert. Salamanca, that whole area of Spain. Is
Yeah,
a
but
desert.
we both
Andalusia,
agree- wait.
Calabria, that whole
We-
Andalusia, up until
Calabria,
Catalonia.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
up until Catalonia. Sorry, Calabria.
It's just pure desert.
Yeah, it's desert, and anyone will tell you this. Obviously
Spain.
now, look into it. You're,
Spain, I've been to Spain,
okay.
mate.
It's Morocco desert.
Yeah, Morocco has deserts. Yeah, it's not all desert though. It's not
the
all
same
desert
terrain.
though,
I
is
know,
it?
but a lot of it is desert.
Yeah, but remember, Arabia
but
Deserta.
do you believe
Wait,
Hannibal
hang on.
took elephants?
There's a
Arabia
Spain to
Deserta
Italy?
is called Arabia Deserta because there's nothing there. It's deserted.
No, that's not true.
It's
Have you ever-
it's
have you ever
just
been to the
desert.
coast? Have you ever been to the coast?
Coast of where?
To the coast of, you see where Arabia Deserta is? Have you ever come to the coast? Have you ever seen what's on the coast?
Yeah, you got the Red Sea on the other side.
Yeah, but what's between the Red Sea and the desert?
More desert probably.
No, it's not. It's
What-
mountains.
Okay,
Watersheds.
mountain.
Yes, look into it. Look into
Okay.
it. You don't even know the geography. This is the issue. You're making claims.
I'm quoting people who do know geography, such as Ptolemy.
Let's look at it right now.
Okay, look at Ptolemy.
You're talking about Ptolemy. When did he alive? When was he alive? Sorry.
It was around 200 AD, I believe.
200 AD.
Yeah,
so you're
that's
talking
it.
about someone who's 1800 years ago. I'm talking about right now.
But them same elephants.
Yeah, but that's
they need
closer to
make
Mecca,
the trek.
isn't it?
Would them elephants then need to make the trek through
Yeah,
the mountains?
there's pass through the mountains. People go up mountains all the time. People, there's cities on the mountains.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but usually people
But
don't
the
build
point I'm trying to
cities
make is
in deserts.
You see, the issue is, yeah, I don't mean to sound a bit rude or whatever, yeah, but this is my thing is, yeah, you see, there's a lot of people view things with a Eurocentric lens. So they say, if we can't find it through our history, then it didn't exist. Without looking at what other people are saying as well. Do you get it? Like, other people don't have their own history.
Okay, can you
If
cite
you're
me some
willing to
history?
concede that Hannibal
Does your
went
history,
through... Sorry?
does your history come solely from like your religious history, like your Quranic history?
course not.
Or are
It
we
largely
going by,
does.
or are we going
Arabs
by
existed
actual
before.
world scholarly
Yeah,
history?
but Arabs
It's not going to be
Because
much
scholarly
scholars.
history doesn't back up a lot
Yeah.
of the claims that you guys make.
No.
But
Such
whereas
as what?
Quranic claims,
Such as what claims? That's what I'm saying. He just made
Wait,
several
wait.
sweeping claims that
Well,
he can't
Okay,
describe.
all right.
I've ever heard is that
Dr.
the sun
Nikolai
doesn't
Sinai. Go
set
on.
in a muddy pool of water.
That's what I'm
Well,
saying.
that's
Context.
another problem,
That's
but-
in context.
Yeah, but it's a
It doesn't. It
literal-
doesn't. No, it doesn't. It's
Or
not.
that the
Okay,
world is
wait.
stretched out like a rug.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
these are just
Or that the
little
moon was
This
split.
is all in context. This is all of these things here. This is poetic language. No one
Yeah.
believes that the land, the,
Yeah, but I
the
mean,
world.
that's
actually
a-
Wait,
that-
does no one believe that the moon was
Well,
split?
okay, cool. So if it's saying that the sun sets in a muddy pool of water, then how do you account for verses that speak about the constellation of the sun and the constellation of around planets around the sun?
Can you show me those verses?
You have to look at things in perspective. But
you
that's
show
what
me
I'm trying
those
to say.
verses?
He's not here to engage. He's not here to be
No, I am
genuine.
engaging with
He's
you.
not here to
I'm
be a
engaging with
devil's
everything you say.
advocate. You're not.
You literally just said that sunset in the middle pool was not to be taken literally. There's no evidence of that in the
cool.
narrative
Can you tell me
whatsoever.
the context behind that?
Let me explain.
No, tell me the
The-
context
no,
behind
no,
it, because you're trying to tell me something that you're saying that I'm wrong. So
Yeah.
clearly you know something I don't know. So
I'm going to
tell
tell
me the
you
context behind it,
that the
'cause I do know
narratives in the
context.
Quran are wrong,
Okay, cool.
and I can give many examples.
No.
Look, okay,
stick to
Surah
that point, please.
54.
Let's
No, the
stick to
point
that
I wanted to stick
Stick
at
to
was
that
Surah
point,
54, the moon splitting in half.
No,
Do you think that's
stick to
true?
the point. Stick to the point.
I- you-
There's Chinese historians that you can find records of that in China. Not even NASA saying that we've seen cracks in the moon that are consistent with the moon breaking.
No, that's a lie. Either you're lying or you're not telling the truth.
I'm looking to it right now.
NASA has been asked about this, and they said there is no evidence the moon was once split in half
So
and
is
then
there
rejoined.
Is there no evidence that there's giant cracks that go from
There
the
are
whole
giant
surface
cracks,
all
but
through the
that,
moon? How do
giant
you
cracks,
explain that?
many different ways. There can be lots of reasons for cracks in the moon. Yeah.
Okay, so let me.
Okay,
So
okay.
I love the way that you just shifted away, yeah. Because you just said a second ago about the sun setting in muddy water.
Because he
And
brought it
yeah,
up,
no, but
and I
I'm
want to choose
asking
that as
you-
an
no, but you- yeah, but
example
you
about.
agreed. But you agreed, so I'm asking you. Can you give me the context
Okay,
behind
okay.
this?
Okay,
Because you keep
no.
making points and you don't know. You're jumping around.
You're jumping around. You're jumping
jumping
around all over the
You-
place.
You brought up that point about the sun setting in the muddy water. You did, and
Right.
you agreed with it. So I'm asking.
Right.
I'm
And I
asking
also
if you
contrasted
understand-
that
Yeah,
with
but I'm
Surah
asking if you
54.
understand the context behind it. Instead of addressing it, he's trying to move on to something. He's like, no, I want to talk about this. Come on, this
Just
is what I'm saying.
talk
This is
about-
why these people aren't. You're
I
not
was
genuine.
going
You're
more
not
just
genuine.
along the lines of like evidential stuff.
You really
Yeah, and we can
You're
talk
going to
about
have a
it.
problem.
Of course.
You're going to have a problem with Islam.
Yeah.
Because
Bring
Islam
up,
is not going to
your
have that kind of
camera, my
evidence.
friend.
What are you showing?
Take a picture of this video. And if you're, which I believe you're sincere, watch it. And I'll talk about the evidences
And be
from India, non-Islamic.
just be
But
wary
the
of
moon
the
splitting
Jean
off.
provocateurs. Just be wary of the agent.
I think
You
there
can
is on
make your
both
own
sides,
mind up.
buddy, if I'm honest.
You can make your own mind up.
I've seen a lot of this
You know what?
stuff and I
You gotta
think
be-
it's
you
on
gotta be-
both
you gotta
sides,
be real,
but
yeah?
I think you're
Since I've
both...
come here, have I attacked his religion? Have you heard me talking about Christianity or anything? Or have I just been solely been on
No,
the
no, you
defense?
haven't. I'll give you that. You're right.
And I could be doing these things. So
You've been a little bit heated, but other than that, it's all right.
I'm
It was
pointing
only me
out-
that brought up
yeah,
the
but I'm pointing out the
examples.
fact that
I don't think he brought up an example about a religious kind of attack.
Isn't it?
either.
But isn't it
I don't
only
think
fair that
kinda
if
came
you do
from-
make a point, you have to substantiate it?
Yeah.
And I've tried to get him to do that several times, and he's just moved around. To
I
other
gave
points. So this is why I'm
Ptolemy
moving
as
this is
an
why
evidence
I'm
of
moving
the
away.
lack of Mecca. I
And
gave the fact there's no
wouldn't say that,
archaeological
man.
evidence as another
I'm
reason.
just reacting to that. You know what I'm trying to say? This is my.
Well, yeah, it's because it shakes you, in all honesty. That's why you do
You're the
it.
one who
Alright.
thought aqueducts. You're the one who thinks they're still
Suppliers
using
of
aqueducts in
water.
Mecca.
No, I'm
Come on,
saying
bro.
that they
Come on,
have
don't
built
try to come at me like
aqueducts.
that. You
That's the
thought they're still
question.
using aqueducts
No,
in
you're
Mecca.
taking what I say out of context again. Come on,
Chris,
man.
what's the argument with Ptolemy, whatever you say?
So Ptolemy was a cartographist.
This guy's only going to rattle me. I know
Bro,
he's
you
not
going
genuine.
past the bin on your way anywhere?
Let's talk about
Are you
Ptolemy.
yeah, I appreciate that, man. Wicked, thank you.
But Ptolemy was a cartographist who happened to travel to Arabia, and when he was there, he took notes of all the major cities and areas that he found. He does not mention Mecca.
From my understanding, he got reports from merchants and travellers.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So in relation to...
I'll give you that. He didn't go to every place,
Hold on.
but he went to the Arabian
I
Peninsula.
don't believe so.
He never went to the Arabian
No.
Peninsula. He never went
No.
there. What
No.
makes you think he never went there? But my point is that you can defeat my argument. Very simple. You simply have to give one account of Mecca on a map or being mentioned anywhere before 600 AD. That's what you got to do, and then my argument's wrong. The reason why I think you struggle with this is because there isn't actually any. And having looked into certain scholars of this, they also say it's a bit of a weird question as to why there isn't any evidence of
Who
it.
would draw maps of Arabia?
Well, maps photography as a study didn't come about until much later, the Renaissance period, right? But in terms of noting places, Ptolemy was someone who was writing down certain areas and who described where they are in relation to each other. We then drew them like 1,000 years later. Yeah.
So what was the importance of Arabia to the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians?
Not much at all. They had an interest in Arabia Felix, which is Yemen, the southern part of Arabia. They thought that was valuable because they tried to conquer it, yeah? Because they actually sent a Roman army to conquer it, and they failed. But they would have gone past where Mecca and Medina would have been in Arabia Deserta, but they didn't record seeing any Kaaba being worshipped, so they didn't record.
How do you know they would have gone past it? What route
Okay,
did
so
they
you
take?
can look at the route. So they would have went from northern part of Arabia, heading down to Yemen. They would have gone from the nearest point to the river, the Red Sea, which would have been along the coast, which would have been roughly near Mecca and Medina.
And who guided them?
The army leaders, I guess.
Huh?
The leaders of the army.
No.
I don't know if it was.
No. An Arab guided them.
Okay, sure. Oh yeah, I remember the story. Yeah.
And where did the expedition start?
I think it was from Egypt.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So if you go from Egypt to Mecca Medina, you would go like that, right?
And what did that Arab guy do?
He misled them, right?
He misled them.
And then he took them to
Yeah, he misled them.
I'm
So,
perfectly happy to think that
problem.
that's
So-
historic. Yeah,
it's shown that the Arab guide misled them.
sure.
If he had an inkling that those Romans from Egypt might have had, not initially, but if they came across it, might have had some liking to Mecca in some way in terms of their intention of conquering, he may well have not guided them past Mecca.
Okay.
Because it's well known, and I've looked into this Arab guide purposefully misguided them on purpose.
Okay.
And the adventure
I
was...
agree with
the
that.
adventure was a catastrophe.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with
And
that.
then,
I get
they,
it.
and then they went back,
But you see-
and
yeah.
I believe, if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the Roman leader, was he executed?
I think it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was such a disaster. When he got back to
Yep,
Egypt,
he was executed.
He was executed.
Right, so that's one account though. My other account is Ptolemy, who also went to the Arabian Peninsula and did not see any evidence of Mecca. He never
Do you
noted it.
accept the argument that I've given that it's a possibility?
It's a possibility in regards to the Roman army going there, which is a separate thing, that
No, I'm
maybe
talking
they
about-
did that.
I'm talking about the
But-
Roman army argument. Do you accept
Yeah, exactly,
my
right?
argument? That's
I'm
a
saying that it's a possibility, yeah?
Okay, no
I think the evidence would say it's more likely that there
Now-
simply wasn't
now,
anything there
Ptolemy,
to find. But, yeah.
Ptolemy, like Idrisi in the 11th century, so Idrisi was similar to Ptolemy. He lived, not to digress, but very quick, he lived in the 11th century. He lived in Sicily, under Roger I, who was a Norman Christian king who conquered Sicily from the North African Arab Muslims. And he also produced an atlas for Roger I, Roger the Great. And a lot of what he got was not only from old maps,
Right.
but all the traders that were stopping off in Sicily and receiving their accounts. Just
Oh,
like
yeah.
Ptolemy. Ptolemy, a lot
Right,
of what...
just get to what are you trying to say?
Ptolemy,
What are you trying to say?
Ptolemy was not Ibn Battuta.
Okay.
Ptolemy was not Marco Polo.
Sure.
Meaning they did not traverse the Mediterranean, the Middle East, the subcontinent, and the Far East in terms of China.
Okay.
Ibn Battuta did,
Yeah.
Marco Polo did,
Yeah, but
Ptolemy
you're
did
not. You're not attacking my point.
So
You're just
what
trying
I'm
to cast
saying,
doubt
no,
on the point.
So what I'm saying is, Ptolemy is not an eyewitness in terms of literally.
He went to Arabian
Bear
Peninsula.
with me, going to the coordinates of supposedly where Mecca is
Right.
or was,
Yep.
and saying there is zero here.
Yeah, but he also recorded where the rivers were.
There is nothing here.
And he said there are no rivers there.
Ptolemy received vast majority of his accounts
Yeah.
were from other peoples.
Who did what? They lived there, yeah? They lived there?
No.
So he never got information about people who lived in the Arabian Peninsula,
These
who
were
would have
pe-
known where the major
these-
cities
These
were.
were people who went to the Greek world and who were traders.
No.
So either if you were a specific trader yourself, or the people that you know of, or the accounts that you've heard, they would relay them to Ptolemy.
Mecca
No.
was nowhere on any trade route
Yep.
of that time.
Yep.
There was no existence of any trade routes going
Yep,
to a
absolutely.
place near
And we know
Mecca
that from Patricia
or coming
Crone,
from Mecca.
And I think his name's
Talking
Michael
about
Cook.
Ptolemy.
That's fine, but I'm just going to give him what he's saying.
Talking about
He is
Ptolemy.
correct on that.
We talked about the. We talked
That's
about,
fine. I'm just adding he is
we talked about
correct.
the Roman army.
Yeah, where you gave an account of what could have happened,
We're
which I think is
talking about
unlikely.
Ptolemy.
Yeah, and I think Ptolemy not referencing Mecca or any rivers near Mecca is proof of not Mecca.
Are there
To allow an
cities?
excavation of
They don't.
Mecca
But
to
then-
prove their
but then the
point.
issue
Because
is you
if
can't
you've
say
not...
because it hasn't been proven, it doesn't exist.
Right, no, I know, there's no...
That's what he's
Silence
doing.
is no...
No,
It's a
I'm saying that on argument
it's
for
a
probability,
simple-
it's
Brother,
probably
it's a simple
not
question. What I'm going to do is go to his writings, which were lost.
Ask
He-
where he thinks Hood came from,
Bear with me.
or where there's incense and them things that come from. How are these guys getting them in there? In
Yemen and
there?
Oman.
Yeah.
Ptolemy lived from 900 AD to roughly about 150 AD. His works were lost
Did he?
and then rediscovered in the 14 and 1500s and translated from, I believe, Greek into Latin. So his
Wait,
works
no,
were
that's not
lost.
Ptolemy.
Yes.
But did
No,
you know
Ptolemy was long before.
Yes.
741
No, Ptolemy
is the
was like
earliest
200 AD
mention
or somewhere.
of Mecca.
90 to 150 AD.
But Ptolemy.
Yes.
Well, Mecca was obviously there then.
90 to
What?
150 AD.
Other
His
than
works
sense
were
of
lost,
sources made
and then they were discovered.
No, you're confused about who we're talking about.
So what I'm saying
No,
is-
but
No, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Of course,
Wait,
no,
wait.
I'm
Top
just-
of my head, do you get it?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to
trying to
he
work out,
came
yeah.
from before
But
the
if it's
time
like there's
of
no
Muhammad.
trade to and
That's
from,
what my argument is.
741
I said 90 to
was the earliest
150
mention.
AD.
I've seen. From what
Oh,
I'm aware
150
of,
AD. Oh, sorry. I thought you said.
into Yemen.
Sorry, my bad. I misheard you.
You know that,
I
right?
thought you were saying he came 1,000 years
When they
later.
went there, they would have
It's a
passed through
simple
Mecca at some
question.
point. So that means Mecca would have been documented.
It's a
Yeah,
simple.
but
It's a
the
simple.
point I'm trying to make is that you're looking for a name for Mecca. How do you know it was
Okay.
called Mecca before?
It's-
I'm showing you
No,
other
that's a
cities
fair
around the
point.
names have
But
changed.
if you think about any city of substantial
simple question.
standing
Yep.
that you would go through on that journey would
It's
be
a sim-
documented
Yep.
that there is a substantially sized city.
Yeah, and people
on
will talk
our way
about
to
it.
Yemen,
But it has.
even
You're
if
saying
it
it's not.
wasn't classed
Yeah.
as
Okay,
Mecca,
show me
it
then.
would still be registered, or someone would have documented. There's a huge city here. We don't know what this is
Yep,
called.
yep.
There's trade routes coming to and from. They have
And it's a
massive
centre of
supply
worship.
Water, but there isn't.
Yeah, there isn't.
What would
But you know
constitute?
what? Sorry.
No problem. What would constitute a major city for you?
That's what.
Large amounts of people
Population.
going there. Thousands of people going there. Tens of
Population,
thousands, not hundreds of
trade.
thousands.
So what I'm going to do is this.
Yep.
I'm going to give myself homework. I'm going to look at Ptolemy's writings.
Yep.
And I'm going to cross-reference them with cities that existed
Yep.
then,
Yep.
which were known about, which he did not mention.
Sure.
If I can give you a couple of cities which were known about, which had, for those times, a substantial amount of population,
Sure.
which he did not mention,
Right.
shows that there's a possibility that
you go.
Mecca existed which was substantial in terms of population, which he did not
Okay,
mention.
so
That's
a good methodology.
Chris,
Totally agree with that.
you're going and forget. Pardon the pun.
Go on.
You're going
Give
up
us a good pun.
Ptolemy's work as gospel. That's what you're doing.
No, I'm looking for any reference to Mecca. Any.
That's different.
I would expect to
different.
find it with Ptolemy because that's literally what he tried to do. Didn't find it.
That's different.
Yeah.
I would say that
Yeah.
than a gospel.
The argument is multifaceted. There are multiple arguments for doubting the existence of it. First of all, where it is, the lack of water there, so it couldn't sustain large populations. Second of all, the fact that cartographers never documented it. Show me anyone before 600
traders
AD.
ever documented
No trade. Yeah, it was some Islamic authorities used to say it was a centre of trade, but Montgomery Watt, I think his name is, completely destroyed that argument. So did Patricia Crone.
That's what point I'm trying to understand.
Those are scholars.
It's a lot more nuanced than that, but it's a centre of trade for who? Pilgrimage place for who?
Right. Supposedly
For who?
for all of the world.
No, it's not. It's a pilgrimage.
No. Supposedly people from all over the world came to the Kaaba. From the time of
Arabs
Abraham.
in the desert.
Chris.
So
Arabs in the
is that
desert.
kind of going along lines? There's a conspiracy against the
Chris.
city of Mecca by other nations that didn't want to document it? Of
course.
Is that what you're saying?
No.
Yeah.
Can
But Mecca was there before Islam, right?
I correct two
So then
things?
before
many
Islam,
years
there was a
before
conspiracy against Mecca.
There's two things. Mecca today, in terms of its water supply,
Yeah.
solely comes from Zemzem.
No, not at all.
Solely.
What today? Today, right?
Yes.
Today? No, not at all.
Yes.
It comes from.
Desalination plants, you're saying.
Yeah.
Desalination
Yeah, yeah.
on the coast.
Yep.
Where they get
one's like far south.
seawater.
From the Hijaz. Yep.
Okay.
You know how much water you need to supply 2 to 3 million people
From my
for weeks.
understanding, it's solely from Zemzem. From my understanding.
I would encourage you humbly to look that up.
That's my second homework.
Look that up.
problem, no
Yeah.
Number two,
It doesn't-
you talked about whole of humanity
Yeah.
going to Mecca.
No. What I mean
For
by is
pilgrimage.
no. All people of many different nations came to the Kaaba.
When?
The Arabs of the desert.
Throughout
When?
from the time of Abraham to the time of.
When did Abraham
rich
live?
in Mecca, then surely
Say 1400 BC?
surrounding
No, I don't know.
civilizations would have
Why does it-
reason
the
to
point-
travel there for trade.
No.
There would be things
When
they
did
can
Abraham
obtain
live?
there that you wouldn't be able to attain from somewhere else.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Well, that's fine. If you don't want to give a date, that's fine.
We don't know when
Okay,
Abraham
sure.
lived.
So-
But my point is
so-
that in that
so-
time period, there
so-
would have been archaeological
So in
evidence.
terms of people coming into Mecca for pilgrimage,
Yeah.
that we know of in terms of relatively recent time frame, are the pagan Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula. They're the ones who came in
Okay.
because they still had that remnants
All right.
of what Abraham
Okay.
was doing.
All right. Think of it this way. If the in the earliest times, like say just before Muhammad, say the 6th century, yeah, there should have been archaeological evidence that they were there, but there isn't.
Traded with
The
most of
pagans
the world.
with the Kaaba.
What do you mean?
No, but what I'm
You
saying
would have
is
saying
Mecca
that even
was
if we
a
ignore
massive
1,000 years ago or whatever and look right up to the time of Muhammad, because according to your narrations, there would have been pagans who would have been encircling the Kaaba at the time. Yeah,
So then, is
But we have no
there any other
evidence of that.
historical recollections from
but we should do, right?
to say Mecca was there?
How old's the Kaaba?
Other than the Quran and other than
How old is the Kaaba?
Well, supposedly since the time of Adam and Eve.
Within Arabian sources. If you choose to,
Or Abraham.
within the Arabian sources, within
Okay,
the
all right,
Arabian
okay, sure.
history,
Where-
I'll show
where
you
would
Kaaba
I
we have
find-
today, how old
If
is
you
it?
choose to accept it, you choose to accept
I can't give you an exact date.
What do you think?
Wait, are you asking for my opinion on how long do I think the Kaaba is? I think it came from the 8th century.
The one standing
Because
today.
here's the earliest map we have of the Kaaba that has the earliest mention we have of the Kaaba is from 741 AD.
Yeah.
That's 100 years after Muhammad died.
I'm going to tell you something. The Kaaba standing today
But even
It's
Mecca
500 years
don't
old.
In literature until 741 either.
Yeah. Sorry, that might be
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean.
that's all, yeah.
the Kaaba we have today is 500 years old.
Because it was destroyed. Yeah. I grant that the Kaaba has been destroyed many times. Yeah.
So it's being rebuilt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Yeah.
If I
Sorry, guys.
no, I'm smoking
alright.
as well. Don't worry about
You can't control the smoke of a vape.
it. If I show you articles,
Just show me evidence that Mecca existed,
Bear
like
with me.
around the time of Muhammad.
if I show you articles
See, you're trying to cast doubt on this rather than just trying to.
destroying them
Yeah.
and rebuilding over them.
So you're saying they destroyed the Kaaba intentionally?
No, other
religious,
So
right,
like,
okay.
That's where Mecca is
like
now.
certain homes of certain
All right. Okay. So you destroyed.
Personalities.
Sure.
and all that.
So what does that demonstrate?
So what that demonstrates is they took no interest in conducting archaeological
I think that's
digs
the biggest,
in Mecca.
something like that.
No interest.
Okay.
They would see a building at the time of the Prophet,
So like what I'm saying is if you
they would demolish it, and they would build onto
it's
it.
never going to
Okay, so to build on top of it, you first have to evacuate the ground underneath it, which you would expect would therefore reveal some archaeological evidence. We know this because this is what they do in Jerusalem.
Did they?
You're saying that it traded locally.
Jerusalem is dealt with by the Israeli government.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
They're interested in archaeological.
Yes, because there's a lot of it, isn't there? Yeah, you agree with me on that.
What I'm saying, Chris, is the Saudi government had no interest. They would demolish and wreck
Okay,
and
so
build on top.
why would they not have an interest in that? When most of the Saudi government's finance comes either from oil or from tourism.
What?
From oil or tourism, yeah.
They just recently opened up for tourism.
Yeah, I know, which is why they've been hurt so much.
When
If
we-
you look at the numbers that travel to Mecca on Hajj, it was like
Oh,
3 or
you
4
think-
million, and then it just...
Sorry. So when you say tourism, you're talking about the pilgrimage.
Yeah, the Hajj,
Sorry.
it mostly comes
I
from
meant
that
like normal
pilgrimage.
tourism.
Yeah. That's what I mean by tourism, yeah, foreign...
Carry on, Sorry.
Sorry, no, so we know that there is... The amount of water needed today to support the 2 to 3 million of Muslims that go on Hajj every year is drastic, it's huge.
So what's the argument?
The argument is, in order to support a substantial amount of people, let's just say it's 100,000, to do that for people who will come into Hajj, you cannot in any way, shape or form rely on the Zamzam well, for one, and you cannot rely on that actually being a place, because it couldn't be a place, because it's a desert.
With a large population.
Think of it this way, in modern times we've only just started doing this. We have Las Vegas. Las Vegas is probably the closest thing geographically to Mecca, because they're both in deserts, they both don't have rivers. You can't, the only reason that Las Vegas worked was because people came in and literally spent lots of money building this modern infrastructure up to support it. I believe that there was a Mecca, probably in the 8th century, because that's when we first have a reference to it. And if I'm right in this, if there is no Mecca at the time of Muhammad, it throws into question everything. All of a sudden, everything is up for question all of a sudden. I mean, think of it this way. You know about the Qibla, yeah? The earliest Qiblas don't face Mecca. There's like 36 of them or thereabouts that never faced Mecca, like the earliest mosques. The Qibla walls, or the specific Qiblas that were facing, what should have been facing Mecca, never faced Mecca. They face either Petra, Jerusalem, or somewhere in between. That to me is clear evidence that there was no Mecca at the beginning. It came later on. Because the thing is, for me to believe that there was a Mecca, I would have to explain how the Qiblas got there. I would have to explain how they were able to provide water and food to people there. I would have had to explain why there's no archaeological evidence there. I'd have to explain why Ptolemy never mentioned it and never said there was a river there. Well, I mean, because there is no river there. But, and you see what I mean? It keeps mounting up. There is an accumulative case as to why Mecca never existed at this time. And it's a strong case. You have like a mountain to climb in order to prove that Mecca existed. Because you've got to show me why all those arguments are wrong.
Good. So I'm just trying to research the water argument in terms of where Mecca gets its water from.
Sure, yeah, look at where Mecca gets water from. If it's from the Zamzam well, I'll be amazed. Because it's a tiny well, it doesn't give much water at all. But because of these traditions and these narrations, you are committed to believing that all of Mecca gets its water from this well.
In the middle of a desert, and say that's Mecca, just example. That
Desalination.
Yep, desalination plants.
So,
You know what? One of the biggest exports of Saudi Arabia is its water, because they have tons of plants that produce fresh water because they need it for the Hajj.
then you would say, okay, we need to, this needs to be recorded as a place.
It's a bit hard. It's like,
Are you a Christian sister or
I'm thinking.
thinking? Oh, that's good. It's a good state, good place to be in. Well, obviously, as a Christian myself, I hope that one day you do become a Christian.
Yeah, I never really had to think about it.
Okay.
I moved up here from down south.
Oh, okay, nice.
Down south, there's only kind of really one religion down there.
Yeah.
And here I've kind of experienced how diverse it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of made me question things, and then
That's good. I think religion is.
driven me to question what I believe in.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like I came from an atheist background originally, and then I became a Christian through my own experiences, as well as looking into things like looking at scripture, looking at how this relates to this, how does this make sense, and trying to sort of do a deep dive in my faith. So I would encourage you to do the same. I would encourage you to talk to lots of people here. There's obviously lots of Muslims here, but there are Christians here as well, and they have their own testimonies about things that they've been through in their life and how they've experienced things and come to have a totally different outlook and a totally different worldview. I mean,
Come here with some questions because
sure? Do you have any questions you'd like to ask? Yeah.
one of my main things that stops me from embracing the religion as a whole is that I am queer
Okay.
in
Yep.
general,
Yep.
and I'm not sure entirely where religion kind of condemns queerness in
Cool.
general. Obviously, there's some modern churches that accept it.
Right.
There was something from John where he walked in and there were homosexuals, men with men, girls with girls, and he said that this is against God's will. So, you know,
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to clarify that. Okay. So.
where in the Bible it condemns it.
So, should I give you a little quick rundown on this, just so you understand? So, in Christianity, as we came from the Jewish religion, we hold to the 10 Commandments of the Jewish law. We believe that the ceremonial law has been dealt with through the person of Jesus Christ. So he fulfilled it. What we mean by that is that he himself, in his place and in his sacrifice, has completed the law. So we're not bound to things like dietary law, which says that we can't eat pork. We're not bound to observing the Sabbath, for example. You'll see different Christian opinions on this, but this is the overall view. Now, what we do know is that there is such a thing as sexual sin, right? Now, I'm going to be honest, I struggle with that in my own life as a young man. I'm not perfect. There are no Christians who are perfect. Many of us have difficulties, all sorts of things across the border. But we look at Jesus as a moral example because we believe he's morally perfect. We believe that he never sinned, so he never did sexual sin, he never did sin of intentionally hurting others or to attack them or anything like that, or to kill anyone. So because he's our example, we look to him for our principles. You can contrast this with Islam, because with Islam, they kind of have more laws. For them, it's about the legal things that they are still following today. Whereas for us, it's more principle. So Jesus said that you are to love one another as you would love yourself. Blessed are the peacemakers.
So they're currently
Is it,
building.
can I just say, mate, is it alright if I continue this conversation and you come back to me? Is that alright? Just because I'm...
Not really, no. I really want to respond.
You want to just wait just a brief moment?
So,
Okay, sure.
and if a Christian talks about another religion, you've got to answer the question. You've got to ask the question why. If I'm talking to you about Islam, I'll only talk about Islam and tell you why Islam is good for you. I wouldn't talk about Hinduism, Buddhism, or Jews or Christians. Just on the religion that he's got to preach as a side note. Anyway, so they are building a pipeline to take desalination water to Mecca, but they're building it now.
Right, so you're telling me right now it's still provided only by the Zamzam well?
I believe so.
I don't believe that for a second. I've looked into this. I can't tell you exactly where these plants are, but there are already freshwater plants in Saudi Arabia.
No, yes, I'm talking about for Mecca.
No, because it gets provided long distance.
Of course it would be,
Okay.
yeah. So last week, the Saudi Arabian government announced it had launched several water projects in Mecca and other sites worth over $800 million. One of the most relevant proposals is to set up a pipeline to carry desalinated water from the desalination plant in El Shuaiba to Mecca and other locations.
Okay, great.
So
that demonstrates that there is a need for water.
Now, yes.
No. Okay, so now.
They're building it in 2019.
Okay. Well,
now
3 years ago, but sure.
So
I think they.
So they didn't need it before.
I don't think so.
I'm
mate.
telling you.
Okay. Well,
telling
I'll
you.
do my homework and re-look at my stuff and
I
make
will
sure
do
I'm
that as
absolutely
well.
right.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that because.
So the water situation,
Yeah.
I believe Zamzam was able up until very recently, it would suffice them.
Okay, I will double check that. Yeah, we'll double check that.
Ptolemy was getting a lot of his information from people. He didn't survey the Arabian Peninsula.
He went there.
And he didn't, I'm telling you now, he did not survey the Arabian Peninsula and go to Mecca and say, and just pass it and give coordinates, latitude or longitude and say, it's not here. He didn't do that. The Roman army, it said, the person that led the Roman army, the guide, was an Arab, and he deceived them so much so that a lot of the army died, and when the leader of the army went back to Roman Egypt, he got executed.
Yep.
Now, if something's prized for you, if he thought this army has come to conquer Yemen, Arabia, Felix, I definitely don't want them to bring. This is a hypothesis. I definitely don't want them to bring them next to Mecca. So as I'm going to deceive him about other areas, I'm also going to deceive him about Mecca. And he was proven to be a deceiver to them.
Sure.
And the third point, again, I believe, probably not today, but up into the recent history, Zamzam was enough to suffice the water needs of Mecca.
All right, thank you very much. We'll leave it at that, yeah? And we'll call it another day. Anyway, talking back to what you were saying before. So,